Hello and welcome to Becky Live. I'm Dr. Becky Andre, and I'm going to be your host for an intimate conversation about various leadership topics. So, my focus today is always to provide a few frames or ways of exploring a particular topic and to expand your awareness and thinking. So, my hope is that this isn't just a consumption of knowledge, rather, it sparks your thinking, and you might even want to discuss it with others around you. So, this is part of a series I'm doing this year on accelerating your development, where I explore the role of attachment, play, curiosity, and reflection in the ongoing growth and development of adults. So this is the second video in the series where we're going to start with examining the role of play to our growth. So the first thing I want to invite you into is to think about an image that comes to mind when you hear the word play. And you might even want to go a little bit deeper and think about what does that image signify for you? So typically when I ask people this question, they will describe images of children engaging in play, their pets engaging in play, or even themselves engaging in play. And yet, even if they're contemplating things for themselves, it usually is something that is non work related. So there's usually some sort of habit or hobby or interest or sports activity in which they're playing. And I want to suggest that we kind of need to bring play a little bit back into the workplace to create better awareness for ourselves, to create energy, and even to create better connections with other people. So, one of the things that I really appreciate about Dr. Stuart Brown it's just a simple sentence, but I think it says a lot. The opposite of play is not work. The opposite of play is depression. And so I want to take us on this journey to kind of explore that sentence and see and unpack it a little bit. So if we look at what is play, well, I think it's important to kind of think about what it feels like or what it creates for us. So it feels pleasurable. It provides energy, not only for us, but the others that are engaged in play. It enlivens us. It eases our burdens. It renews optimism, and it opens up new possibilities. And when the world kind of shut down in the first part of COVID-19, and we kind of think about we were all kind of isolated, the lack of play created some difficulties for us, but likely you might have eventually moved into some playful moments to help you with the stress and the anxiety and really the volatility of the situation. So, that might have shown up as enjoying maybe getting back to a hobby that you hadn't had time to do before. It might have been having, instead of commuting to work, you were having the opportunity to make food. It could have been reading. Some people had, support systems and were in good mental health that they actually could step into learning something new. But that play provides a really important part of helping us navigate things. And you might even think about how play has connected you to other people. I think that's the other aspect that I might add to this slide is it also creates connection with others that are engaging in that play with us. But if we look at the kind of the science of it, so a lot of different streams of academia have looked at play. So we've got research from neuroscientists, developmental biologists, psychologists, like in all of the psychologist kind of strains, social scientists, and even more have really kind of center play as a profound biological process. So it does a couple of things. It helps the animal species evolve. I mean, it really plays about promoting survival. So we think about the play that we see maybe between tiger cubs of preparing them for the hunting process. It shapes the brain to make animals smarter and more adaptable. So the research has really shown that animals that actually engage in play, it's actually helping them adapt to the conditions and environment that they are embedded in. In higher animals, it fosters empathy and makes complex social groups possible. And there's some early research, so it's still probably too early to form any kind of major conclusions about it. But there is research that indicates they've been looking at individuals that do mass shootings, and they've been going back into their childhood to see was there play there. And the ones that I have read have indicated that for those individuals, it really was devoid of play. So there's some curiosity around, is play kind of as humans our ways of helping us navigate these complex social groups in which we're embedded. And, even for me and even for Stuart Brown, play is at the core of creativity and innovation. It really does kind of open up possibilities for us. If we think about life without play, kind of that second part of Dr. Brown's statement of, the opposite of play is depression, a life without play is absent of flirting, daydreaming, comedy, irony, games, sports, books, art, basically nothing to really lift us out of the mundane of the day-to-day life. And if we look at kind of types of play, there's body and movement, there's imagination, there's objects that we might play with, there's social play, kind of rough and tumble that we might see in young kids. There's celebratory or ritual types of play, storytelling, and you might even be thinking of some additional types of play that you might add to this list. So one of the things that I really liked in Eberle's book on the elements of play was how he conceptualized kind of the different parts of play. And I love all of the different words in here to be thinking about play in more of an expansive way. But it's not necessarily a linear progress, but he suggests that there is kind of a sequence or some elements that tend to flow into each other. So he suggests that play begins in anticipation. So it's in imagination, predictive, pleasurable, tension, and it gives way to surprise, which is this novel break through our habits of thoughts and being. And then pleasure is a part of the process and an incentive to play, mostly momentarily, though. And understanding enlarges our ability for empathy and capacity for insight. The strength flows from that understanding, sharpening our mental abilities, training our physical skills, deepening awareness, and even insights into our social capabilities. And when play adds understanding to that strength, he says the product is poise. More than flow, the experience kind of increases dimensions of dignity, grace, composure, ease, wit, fulfillment, and spontaneity. And so there's this play element. There are different ways of playing. Now, um, as we mature, Dr. Brown says we develop a style or mode in which we are most comfortable being playful. And he calls these styles of playfulness play personalities. Now, these play personalities that I'm about to go through are not based on scientific data. So there's not, empirical validity and reliability. Rather, it's really just Dr. Brown discerning from thousands of interviews and observations. He really did spend a majority of his life dedicated to the study of play. And he identified 8 primary play personalities that we're going to take a look at. And he does assert that most people tend to have one dominant play personality type and maybe 1 or 2 minor types. Now, I might suggest it's a little bit more fluid than that. I think it might be more aligned with the environment we're in. Yeah, but I think there are certain ways in which we play that maybe we're more drawn to than others. And later on, I'll give you a QR code where you can take a quiz that was created by Lindsay, I think it's Brahman, or it might be Brayman, who created a quiz based on Dr. Brown's play personalities. But the first one is the Joker. And this really revolves around silliness, making other people laugh, The jokers tend to be the class clown in school, and they might even engage in play through telling jokes, doing funny impersonations, or playing practical jokes. Now, this next one, I can never say the word, so I'm going to attempt to say it, but I'm probably going to get it wrong. The kinesthetic, I can't even say it. You're just going to have to read it. These are people who play through movement. They experience pleasure in movement and feeling the result of physically pushing their bodies. And so this category might include athletes, but competition is not the main focus. It's really the joy of engaging in the activity takes precedent. And so their play might take the form of running, dancing, sports, yoga, swimming, hiking, or walking. But definitely there's always some sort of movement with it. Now, the explorer is enthusiastic about and engages in play by exploring the world around them. And those of you that are maybe interested in my talks and my videos might find that you are an explorer. Now, this can be physical, going to new places. It can be emotional, where you're maybe searching for a deeper meaning through music, art, or movement. Or it might be mental, where you're researching a new area of interest or reading a book. It's definitely one that I think I relate to most of kind of that exploration of what is possible, what new things can I learn. And the competitor is the next one, which engages in play through competitive games with specific rules and really enjoys the thrill of winning. So the games can be solitary, such as trying to beat your own top score in a video game, or they could be social, such as competing in a team sport. But the competitor may also play through observing and actually being a fan. So it may not be actually participating in it. It may be that they're just enjoying watching the sport. And a lot of us did that with the Olympics. So the director engages in play through planning and executing events. So they are kind of the organizers of the social world, and they might be the instigators of like a weekend up north or throwing a party. Directors may be active in creating a Facebook group or organizing a meeting, but they're definitely all about planning and executing those events. And then the collector plays through engaging and seeking and holding on to the best and most interesting collection of objects or experiences. So sometimes it's a physical representation, sometimes it's more of an abstract of collecting those stories or experiences. And they experience bliss in finding kind of a new piece, an experience, either organizing or showing off their collection. So the collector might be interested in coins, purses, shoes, cars, photographs. I mean, really, the possibilities are endless. And the artist creator is someone who plays through creating and making things. So they might engage in drawing, building, sculpting, painting, singing, knitting, gardening, woodworking, and there's really just a number of creative endeavors. They also may take joy in fixing or making something work. So, like taking a broken item, cleaning and replacing parts, and putting it back together. And the last and final one is the storyteller, which engages in play through adventure into the imagination. They might enjoy reading novels, writing, or watching movies in theater. The storytellers enjoy being immersed in a story, experiencing the thoughts and emotions of characters in those stories. And so, as I've been going through these, you might be thinking about some ways in which maybe you engaged in play either as a child or now. And again, this quiz is not validated and reliable. So, I mean, you have to kind of hold it very lightly. It's probably a step above maybe the cosmopolitan or social media quizzes that you take, but not quite as rigorous as some of maybe the psychometric assessments that we use in our workplaces. But get playful, take the quiz, and kind of see what happens. Now, I'm going to bring us back to development. So I want to kind of remind us, if you haven't watched the first video, that as we are developing and maturing, there's kind of two things that are coming along on that journey. One is I'm being, so that's I'm learning new skills, I'm learning new knowledge. And there's this becoming where I'm getting a deeper understanding and I have greater capacity to handle complexity. All right. So those greater capacities aren't necessarily better. It just is different. It's just a different capability. And so when we think about like in the workplace, ideally we want our becoming to kind of align with the capabilities that are required of the job. We don't want them to be too hard or too easy. So one of the constructs I use as I engage with clients is comes from hierarchical complexity. So for those of you in the academic world, that's comes from Dr. Michael Commons, which identifies stages. And Dr. Commons' mathematical formula goes across more than just human development. It even looks at plant and animal, and it can be applied in a number of contexts. But there really is kind of these stages that we go through. And we fundamentally know that there's a difference between a newborn baby, a toddler who's learning to crawl, a teenager that can handle some abstract concepts, and a physicist that can do, theoretical problems. So there are different kind of capabilities that need to be taken into account. And so when we look at how it comes into play with my clients is I'm really looking at their cognitive complexity. How it's not about what you know, that's really kind of your IQ, but this is about how do you use what you know and how complexly can you use it. And so if we think about it, of getting our children ready for bed, when they're younger, we first kind of have to break down the pieces. So we have to focus on first learning the skill of putting your pajamas on. And then we might learn the skill of brushing your teeth. Then we might learn the skill of picking out a book to read. And then, so we might have to focus on each of these skills separately. And then one day our child is just ready for us to say, and so these kind of discrete pieces can come together and we can say to the child, it's time for bed. Now, this same thing happens in adulthood. It just isn't quite as visible, and it takes a little bit more time and a little bit more support to be able to do that. But when we introduce play into development, so this is a visual representation of Dr. Fisher's dynamic skill theory and how kind of development works through skills. But play, when we bring this into development, helps both the coach and the person working on being developed allow some movement and emergent. It's not this linear process. If you go from A to B to C to D, you could go from A, which sparks G, which sparks S. And so play kind of allows this movement and emergent that is a part of development. And so I want to talk about specifically some ways in which I introduce play into development. And one of the ways is I'm always looking for the micro movement. So that small little space that might create some opening. So it's listening for the pain. Where are some of the tension? Where is the angst? Probing for kind of the motivation or curiosity to either resolve that or move into a new way of being, inviting them into play. And really, this is also a reminder for me to stay curious of their emotions, their reactions, and lessen the tension when needed. So sometimes I might step in and offer a framework to play around with as an element to kind of create that movement. It's also about holding space and allowing time for there to be some play and injecting some fun and humor. Sometimes when people are holding on so tightly, it actually constricts that micro movement. And so for me, it's always looking for how do we soften it a little bit, soften the hold onto things. And you might want to go back and watch my first video on attachment, but I'm trying to soften the attachment. And I oftentimes will use play as a movement into softening that attachment. So I'm going to show you a few examples of play movements. So if you watched my earlier video, you know about kind of these different levels and phases. but I'm just going to talk about three common ones that I see when I'm working with leadership, leaders. There's things before this, there's things after this, but these are kind of the three most common that I see. The first one is kind of an advanced linear thinker, and you'll see 65% is listed there. That is kind of a guesstimate. I mean, it's an educated guesstimate on what percentage of the adult population falls into kind of a linear thinker. And their current thinking is that the answers are outside of me. All right. So they're looking for others to invite them into play. And so I have a couple of examples of how I might conceptualize if they're a collector play, if they're a storyteller play. So if they're a collector, and that's how they prefer to play, I might ask them to kind of collect what is most interesting about this situation. If they're a storyteller, I might say, how might your story change if the answer came from inside of you? So, they might be describing how it's coming from other people. And I might invite them into describing how it is for you. And you can see as we move into early systems thinking, that early system thinker is able to have an individual view of the problem. All right. And so my storyteller play and my collector play is an invitation for them to start to play around with that individual view of the problem. Now, if they're an early systems thinker, I'm going to ask them to play in different ways because I want them to begin to see how their perspective is different from others. I want them to begin to see some limitations to their perspective. And so if they're a joker, I might say, what joke or impersonation would others make about you and how you're viewing the problem? If they're an explorer, I might ask, if you were to collect others' views of the situation, what would your collection look like? If someone is an advanced systems thinker, I am inviting them into seeing how these different perspectives are connected. All right. And so if they're a competitor, I might say what perspectives are winning and why. If they're more of an artist or a creator, I might say, how would you create a visual of these different views? And so play can be a really interesting place to kind of move them into while providing some energy, excitement, enlivening them, and loosening that attachment a bit so that that movement can be possible. So for you, for your play, you might want to think about what is your play preference and how might being playful support your development? Maybe what are those areas where you're just holding on so tightly that you might need to loosen it a little bit, and play could be a way of creating that movement for you. And what support might you need to be more playful? It might be a coach. It might be the free assessment that I showed you for the QR code. It might be a challenging assignment, but what might be able to help you? So I hope that you're beginning to see how play might be able to help support your development and growth and movement. If you're interested in our series, we do have two more in our series where we're taking a look at how to accelerate your development. So on November 15th, I'm going to be covering curiosity and the role of that in development. And then on December 13th, we'll be talking about reflection and a bit about contemplation and the difference between those two and how that helps support your movement. And as always, I want to thank you for listening to my perspective, and thank you for being here. You can be connected with me in a few ways. I post my emerging thoughts and experiences on leadership on LinkedIn, so you can look at upcoming events or learning opportunities on my website. And then, of course, this video and other videos are on my YouTube channel, where I have 15 to 20-minute videos around particular topics. So they can be great videos to watch as a leadership team, and then discuss insights or ways you see things differently. I want to activate potential in the world, and this is my way of doing that. Feel free to ask me any questions and connect with me. And I just want to thank you for joining us for this Becky Live, and a reminder to stay playful.